රිවයින් කරන්න පුළුවන් නිසා මුකුත් මගේ වෙන්නේ.
BOTV TV බලන හොඳම විදිහ.
Good evening. Tonight, paying the price. Parliamentarian Dayasiri Jayasekara questioned by the CID for 5 hours over accepting funds from perpetual treasuries. An outright no. Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna refuses a SLFP presidential candidature of President Sirisena, says the party will not support.
That we will not directly or indirectly support in any manner whatsoever the candidature of His Excellency Maithripala Sirisena.
All clear. The Pivithuruhela Urume says former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa's dual citizenship will not be an issue to contest the upcoming presidential elections.
The US citizenship of Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is not a bar in any manner for him to contest the forthcoming presidential election.
Threatening defamation. JVP says will go to courts against statements by the United National Freedom Front. They say challenge accepted. And in international headlines, the historic summit. Both US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un arrives in Singapore ahead of their historic meeting tomorrow. It is 9 o'clock on the dot. This is First at 9 on Other Derana 24/7, Sri Lanka's news channel. Hello everyone, I'm Ayush Johnny. If it goes ahead as planned tomorrow, we will all be witnessing history. A full report on the much anticipated summit occurring in Singapore coming up later on in the show. But first, we begin here at home and on more news on the Perpetual Treasuries Fund disbursement. Parliamentarian Dayasiri Jayasekara arrived at the Criminal Investigation Department today to give a statement for his alleged involvement in receiving money from Walt and Rowe Associates Private Limited, a subsidiary company of the controversial Perpetual Treasuries Limited. The parliamentarian left the CID premises after 5 hours of questioning.
In a backdrop where 118 parliamentarians are alleged to have received money from the owner of Perpetual Treasuries Limited, Arjuna Aloysius, names of 3 MPs have been confirmed along with the former Central Bank Governor Arjuna Mahendran. Following these allegations, CID used notices for parliamentarian Dayasiri Jayasekara to give his statement on the matter. He had given his statement for 5 hours. Meanwhile, the Attorney General stated before the Court of Appeal today that there is no legal basis for Perpetual Treasuries owner Arjuna Aloysius and CEO Kasun Palisena, who are both currently remanded, to make a bail appeal through revision petitions. Attorney General made this statement when the revision petition by the suspects were taken into consideration today. The Ravana Balaya organisation in the meantime filed a complaint with the Commission to investigate bribery or corruption, requesting it to launch an investigation about parliamentarians who received money from a subsidiary company of the Perpetual Treasuries.
The election was held during the period from 17th of August in 2015 onwards, but they had received these checks on the days such as August 24th, October 12th in 2015 and on the 31st of March in 2016, which means they got the money after the election. Both parliamentarian Dayasiri Jayasekara and State Minister Sujiva Senasinghe are co-members. This seems like they received bribes here. We request these politicians to be arrested and questioned on the matter.
Meanwhile, several other views were also expressed regarding the alleged 118 parliamentarians today.
Of course I will, because I am used to going to courts all the time. The Attorney General as well as police can take legal action against both of them under various crimes allegations. As a party, we need to make a decision at the working committee meeting about them. We haven't held the working committee meeting yet after these names were revealed. JVP parliamentarian Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa today revealed that he had sent a letter of demand requesting 500 million rupees for defamatory statements made by the General Secretary of the United National Freedom Front. The parliamentarian made the remarks at a media briefing held at JVP headquarters today.
ජනතා විමුක්ති පෙරමුණට එහි මන්ත්‍රීවරයෙක් හැටියට
We will take legal action against these defamation statements made against the JVP and myself. We sent a letter of demand this morning.
උදේ අපි යන්ත්‍රවාසියක් යවුන් ලැබුවා.
Meanwhile, in response, the General Secretary of the United National Freedom Front expressed these views today.
I like to say to the JVP that you won't be able to stop me by filing these kinds of cases against me. I'm ready to face any number of cases. I would also like to ask the JVP whether or not they commenced the start of a change program with our journalist Mahesh Senanayake, whether or not they took money from the central bank bond scam. The JVP is not as how it was used to be. This has become a red elephant brigade. We know who they are working for. I have all the evidence, so file your case against me. Fishermen continue to protest in several districts across the island today, demanding the government to grant the kerosene subsidy at the price it was earlier given. Meanwhile, the all-island multi-day fisheries trawler owners say that subsidy should not only be granted on kerosene but also for diesel.
The fishing community in Negombo continued their protests against the kerosene price hike for a fourth day today. The fish market of Negombo was seen closed today as a symbol of their protest. The government recently increased a litre of kerosene from 44 rupees to 101 rupees, parallel to the increase of the global market prices. Fishermen in Negombo gathered at the St. Sebastian's Church in Vellavidya this morning and held a discussion about their future actions over the matter. The discussion was held with the participation of the Deanery of Negombo, Reverend Father Clement Rosairo, and the priest overlooking the fishing activities in Negombo, Reverend Father Sujiva Tukurala. During the discussion, the fishermen decided to continue their protest and accordingly held a protest march from St. Sebastian's Church, Vellavidya, to Negombo Municipal Council, demanding to reduce the price of kerosene. Meanwhile, the fishermen in the area of Kudavella in Magguna refrained from fishing and held a protest march today. They began from their ferry and marched along the Colombo-Galle main road up to the area of Magguna. The protests were held despite a statement by the State Minister of Fisheries Dilip Vedarachi that the prices will be reduced to 70 rupees. In the meantime, fishermen in the area of Mattakulia also refrained from fishing and held a protest. Following the government's decision to reduce the price of kerosene down to 70 rupees, the Fishermen's Association in Chilau, Kalpitia and Vennapur, however, cancelled their protest today even after deciding to conduct an island-wide protest. But in the meantime, All Island Multi-Day Fisheries Trawler Owners Association are in preparation to launch a protest demanding a subsidy not only for kerosene but also for diesel.
The problem remains the same for diesel. Doesn't the government consider us as fishermen? We too have our right to reduce the price of diesel.
In the meantime, a discussion was held between the leaders of the fisheries associations and the Minister of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources Development, Vijit Vijayamuni Soisa, this evening.
The Honourable President had discussion with the Minister of Finance. He called me and then passed the phone to the Finance Minister. We then decided to provide kerosene to the fishing community for 70 rupees. We will present a cabinet paper tomorrow in this regard. Let's take you to the north now. When the 3-decade-long war came to an end in Sri Lanka, one of the most principal responsibilities which lay with the government is ensuring reconciliation between ethnic communities who are wounded by the brutal conflict. Tonight, we are going to bring you the story of how an officer of the Sri Lanka Army who was tasked with heading a rehabilitation program in the northern province captured the hearts of the people in the region.
Lieutenant Colonel Ratnapriya Bandhu assumed his duties in 2012 as the commanding officer of the Sri Lanka Civil Security Force for the districts of Jaffna, Kilinochchi and Mullaitivu. His primary responsibility was to lead the special rehabilitation program in the northern province. This was a program designed to establish and enhance reconciliation in the province through the rehabilitation of former LTTE cadres as well as civilians in the war-affected areas. The program also became the platform for its rehabilitated participants to obtain the much-needed professional skills for various professions in society. They were given the training after being recruited as officers of the Civil Security Force. Years of effort through this special program paved the way for not only the professional skills development, but also the development in the education sector in the northern province. However, after 6 years of successful contribution to this program, yesterday marked the last day for Lieutenant Colonel Ratnapriya Bandhu in his post in the province. He has been transferred to the Ambepussa army camp to assume his new post there. But people in Jaffna, Kilinochchi and Mullaitivu were not ready to say their goodbyes to a leader who did much to enhance livelihood and mindset of lives which were broken by the conflict. Is this story not an example to prove that reconciliation is not just a word, but also an achievable goal for a nation that needs it the most?
And more local stories we have for you tonight. Chairman of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Professor G.L. Puri, says that the party will not support the candidature of President Maithripala Sirisena as the presidential candidate of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. Speaking to First at 9, he added that supporting the president would lead towards the downfall of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party.
Now, I want to say on this occasion very explicitly, very emphatically, that we will not directly or indirectly support in any manner whatsoever the candidature of His Excellency Maithripala Sirisena for another presidential term. We will not do that. Now, we must not forget that President Sirisena is the head of this government. He is at the very apex, the pinnacle of this government. He often criticizes the policies of his government as though he is an outsider. But he is not only an integral part of the government, he is in every sense the head of this government. So he cannot evade responsibility for the total mess that this country is in at the present time. Moreover, the SLFP has now made a clear decision to continue the coalition arrangement with the United National Party. Now, we also want to say this, that the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, like all other parties, have had their bad times. They've gone through rough periods. If we support the candidature of President Maithripala Sirisena for another term, then we will be contributing to that position.
Leader of the Pivithruhela Urumia and UPFA parliamentarian Uday Gammanpilla asserts that the dual citizenship status of former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa will not be an impediment for contesting the next presidential election. Speaking at a media briefing in Colombo today, the parliamentarian took to address various comments on the eligibility of the former Defence Secretary to be a presidential candidate.
After the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, dual citizens cannot contest the presidential election as a candidate. Because of this, government being suffered with gotaphobia are now spreading rumors that the US government has rejected Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa's application for renunciation of his US citizenship. Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 is the governing law in respect of renunciation of the US citizenship. According to section 349A5, any citizen who wishes to relinquish his US citizenship can do so without any restriction. You should attend the appointment along with the documents mentioned, namely DS 4079 to DS 4082. Then your second passport, as well as along with 2 persons to witness your signature in the renunciation affidavit. So I think renunciation of the US citizenship is so simple, so quick. Therefore, with great responsibility, I am telling the entire nation that the US citizenship of Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is not a bar in any manner for him to contest the forthcoming presidential election.
Former President Mahinda Rajapaksa claims that flight operations to the MATTALA International Airport have been suspended over time as a result of a political plan. The former president said this to reporters after paying a visit to the airport premises today. The country's second international airport was left without a single scheduled flight from Friday last week after Dubai-based airliner Fly Dubai cut its daily service.
Former President Mahinda Rajapaksa visited the MATTALA International Airport today.
This is all about the government's game of revenge. An average of 78 planes have operated to the airport within a period of a month. We have earned money through that. These operations came to a close following a cabinet paper. Some politicians made this happen by using Sri Lankan Airlines as the trump card.
The former president also took up questions from reporters following an event in Colombo yesterday.
A party cannot be developed by just making new appointments. They should be well aware of the people's views first. They must withdraw from the UNP-led government. The current status of the country is a result of the blame game between the president and the prime minister. They do not have much time, only until December next year. The country does not have to wait until 2020. Elections will happen in 2019. But they might try to postpone elections through constitutional amendments. We have doubts over efforts to bring in amendments to abolish the executive presidency. A special ceremony to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Science College Mount Lavinia was held under the auspices of President Maithripala Sirisena today. The building construction for the activities of the primary section and the Suhuru classroom building under the national program Nearest School is the Best School was also declared open by the President. President Maithripala Sirisena was warmly welcomed and escorted by the students of the college when he arrived at the Science College Mount Lavinia this morning. Awards and certificates were presented by the President to the outstanding students of the college after declaring open the newly constructed smart classrooms and the building. The donation of the wheelchair to a handicapped female student of the college was also taken place at this event. The Vidyabhimani commemoration plaque was presented to President Sirisena at the official function held afterwards. Symbolizing the arrival of President Maithripala Sirisena, a Nas sapling was planted at the college premises as well. Moving on to other local stories, IFTAR is observed during the holy month of Ramadan and is one of the oldest rituals followed by Muslims all over the world. In Sri Lanka, a group of young individuals held an interfaith IFTAR yesterday with the participation of individuals from all races and religions.
In Islam, IFTAR is one of the religious observances of Ramadan and is often done as a community with people gathering to break their fast together. Interfaith Colombo, which is an organization to promote religious tolerance, organized an interfaith IFTAR in order to provide an opportunity for persons from different backgrounds and cultures to understand each other's beliefs and foster relationships. The event was held in Colombo last evening.
In the times we are living, this is very important because it's no longer enough for us to practice our own faith. We need to relate our faith to the other. And it's a challenge sometimes. We are challenged, how do we relate? It's easier to become, at times, it seems it's easier to become a good Buddhist, good Muslim, good Christian, and stick to our community, to isolate ourselves saying that we are becoming better. There is a trend like that, and that seems like, that's okay. But I think there is more to that. We need to go beyond that. We need to step out of our typical zone and relate to those who we see as the other.
The Australian Trade Investment Commission says that currently over 11,000 Sri Lankan students are receiving their higher education in Australia. This information revealed at the alumni gathering of Griffith University in Queensland, Australia, held recently in Colombo. This is the first time an event for Sri Lankan alumni of the university was held in Sri Lanka.
The alumni gathering of Griffith University, based in Queensland, Australia, was held under the auspices of Pro Vice Chancellor of Griffith Business School, Professor David Grant. The event saw the participation of academics, students, faculty members of Griffith Business School and representatives of the Australian High Commission.
Well, there has been a tremendous growth in terms of the number of Sri Lankan students choosing to study in Australian institution under their own stream. At the moment, you get about more than 11,000 Sri Lankan students studying in Australia. So I think that's a big number. And also, if you see the growth rate last year, it was 36% compared to the previous year. So if you take last 15 years, this was the highest growth that Australian education sector has achieved in terms of receiving Sri Lankan students.
You are watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
On to business news now. The Investment Migration Council, a worldwide association for investor immigration and citizenship by investment based in Switzerland, has accepted Sri Lanka as one of its global destinations to promote investor migration. Incidentally, Sri Lanka is the first country in the SAARC region to be approved by the IMC. Speaking to First at 9, Chairman of Export Development National Programme, Dr. Prabhat Ukwata says that in the next 2 years, Sri Lanka can attract 10% of business migration among 60 IMC member countries who have engaged in business migration amounting to 1.5 billion euros.
From one country to another country, they migrate to live and do business. The IMC is the World Council for Investor Migration, which is based in Switzerland, and they have at the moment more than 300 representatives in 60 countries. When we consider the individual and family-based investments, Sri Lanka is very potential to attract for tourism industry, and also we encourage people to invest in the export-oriented like cut flowers business, and also the organic farming, including spices, vegetable and fruits, and also the herbs and greens. So these are the potential market that at the moment we are considering to attract investors. IMC presently has more than 300 representatives who promote investor migration opportunities to the world. Annual turnover with this network is around $1.5 billion. So we expect the first 2 years to attract at least 10% of this network turnover to Sri Lanka in this individual and family-based resident guest tailor-made investor program.
Let's take you to the stock market now. Stocks ended lower today as losses in the trading, construction and engineering and services sectors led shares downwards. At the close in Colombo, the all-share price index fell 0.04% to hit a new 3-month low. The S&P SL20 index, however, closed at 0.14% higher at 3,544 points. Now here is Nishant Bathagalla from the Colombo Stock Exchange with a detailed report.
The turnover was 393.9 million, with 14.9 million shares changing hands in 2,715 trades. The market capitalization at the end of the day was 2,966.6 billion rupees. Today's foreign purchases were 172 million rupees and the foreign sales were 112.4 million rupees. There was one crossing for the day with a turnover of 25.2 million rupees.
Well, history is in the making as one of the most polarizing figures in the world have for once agreed to meet. I'm talking about President Trump and the leader of the North Korea, Kim Jong-un. In a matter of hours, if they meet, this will be the first time in the history of the world where leaders of these two nations meet face to face. and everything from security to finances needed for the historic summit between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un are in place at the moment. The two leaders arrived in Singapore yesterday and been busy with official engagements since.
Ahead of the historic summit, both US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un arrived in Singapore yesterday. North Korean state media, which rarely reveal activities of leader Kim Jong-un, today raised the possibility to establish a new relationship with the United States. US President Donald Trump meanwhile tweeted that he has a good feeling about the much-anticipated summit. As soon as he arrived in Singapore yesterday, North Korean leader met with Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong for bilateral talks. Later on, US President Donald Trump, who arrived in Singapore a few hours after the North Korean leader, also met with the Singapore Premier for bilateral discussions. Following these discussions, Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong expressed optimism that the meeting between the two leaders will alleviate tensions in the region. Singapore Premier also revealed today that his country is willing to bear the heavy expenses for hosting of the historic summit.
I would say plus or minus around $20 million. We may be able to recoup a little bit of that, but I think it is a cost which we are willing to pay, and it's our contribution to an international endeavor which is in our profound interest. It's not easy to find a place to host such a meeting. Both sides have to agree, it has to meet their requirements, it has to be politically and diplomatically acceptable to them. So there are not very many possible choices of places to go.
Security has been tightened in the island city-state of Singapore, including the areas around the hotels where the two leaders are staying. Ahead of the meeting between their respective heads of state, US and North Korean officials held discussions today in a late bid to narrow differences before their leaders hold the historic summit. With gaps remaining over what denuclearization would entail, officials from both sides were trying to push the agenda forward. When Trump and Kim meet tomorrow at Sentosa, a resort island off Singapore's port with a Universal Studios theme park and man-made beaches, they will be making history. Enemies since the Korean War between 1950 to 1953, leaders of North Korea and the United States have never met previously or even spoken on the telephone. Tomorrow will mark the first meeting between a sitting North Korean leader and a sitting US president.
You are watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Derana 24/7.
Sports now. Despite a hard-fought ton from Kusal Mendis, Sri Lanka faced a defeat of 226 runs against the West Indies in the first test of the tour at Queen's Park Oval yesterday. The West Indies were exceptional with their bowling performances, not forgetting that the batsmen handed Sri Lanka a target of 453 runs.
Batting first, the West Indies showcased solid batting performances against the Sri Lankan bowling defence to declare at a total of 414 runs at the loss of 8 wickets. In reply, Sri Lanka could only muster 185 runs all out, with the West Indies at a lead of 229 runs. Coming out to bat for the second innings, the West Indies declared at 223 runs for 7 wickets. Defending a victory target of 453, Sri Lanka took the bat for their second innings, only to be reduced to a total of 226 runs. Kusal Mendis was the highlight of the Sri Lankan innings with his knock of 106 runs.
West Indies have won. Then the spinners chipped in.
World number 1 and who is also dubbed as the King of Clay, Rafael Nadal, won his 17th major by lifting his 11th French Open title yesterday, defeating 7th seed Dominic Thiem. In claiming a 17th Grand Slam title to move 3 shots off Swiss maestro Roger Federer's mark, Nadal also matched Margaret Court's record of 11 titles as a single major.
Austria's Dominic Thiem strained every sinew trying to cling on to Rafael Nadal and sometimes surprised the audience with solid back and forehands in a run for the French Open title. But it ultimately proved a futile mission as the relentless Spaniard proved insurmountable, winning 6-4, 6-3, 6-2.
6-4.
In the meantime, Australian tennis legend Ken Roswell has inadvertently sparked a storm, with comments made about Dominic Thiem after the Austrians lost to Rafael Nadal in the French Open final yesterday while presenting Nadal with his trophy.
But that's what happens in tennis, and Rafa was just a little bit too good, and I think Dominic was a little bit disappointing with his own game today. We don't think.
Katharina Chang has your weather.
A very good evening and welcome to Forecast First. Now, temperatures will range between 21 and 34 degrees Celsius over the course of the day, with the highest temperature recorded in the eastern region of the island. Now, there will be a low precipitation zone, particularly in the western region of the island. However, some sunny weather is forecast for most of the northern province, particularly in the areas of Jaffna, Wownia, Trincomalee and Mannar over the course of the day. However, some wet weather can be expected in the Puntland district in the next 24 hours. Moving downwards, however, thunder showers or showers can be expected in the main cities of the western region of the island as well as in the southern part of the island, particularly the cities of Colombo, Kandy and Galle over the next 24 hours. That is it from your weather centre tonight. Up next is your city by city forecast.
And that is a part of your world tonight right here on Other Derana 24/7, Sri Lanka's news channel. I'm Mahesh Johnny. First at 9 will return tomorrow at the same time. Be sure to join us then. But before we wrap things up, we'd like to take you to the University of Peradeniya, surrounded by the misty hills of Hamthana. It is the home to 15,000 students, 1,000 academians and 2,500 administrative staff members. The university spans an area of nearly 700 hectares and most of the area remains a forest. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Bringing you the news and information 24 hours a day. This is Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Other Derana 24/7.